And I want to also say this, and I'd like to just clarify and put adults on blast too, because I think it can be very easy generationally to say things like, I didn't have social media growing up, so I didn't have to deal with all this. And, all kids these days, they just need to get outside and touch grass and climb rocks. And yes, but also this is the reality of today. So again, like I said earlier, how do we intersect here with prevention, understanding that it is the reality?
Welcome to Prevention Leaders Podcast with Dave Clausen, your source for insights into the world of substance misuse prevention. Each episode, Dave brings you the latest strategies, expert discussions, and real-life success stories designed to empower your work and inspire impactful change. Whether you're a prevention professional, community advocate, or simply passionate about making a difference, this podcast will keep you informed and motivated. Get ready to lead with a confidence that drives lasting results. Let's lead the change together.
All right, podcast listeners, here we are back for another episode. And for those that have found this podcast via social media, or those that, are part of my social media family, we're going to talk about social media today because the one and only Rikki Barton is here with us. Hello, Rikki.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Yes, good to have you back. It's been a minute since you've been on, and I feel like, you were just starting your journey with Onward. And so before we get into talking social media, can you give us kind of where are they now update on what you're doing?
Absolutely. It has been a while. So you're right. Last time I was on here, I was just starting my journey. And what that looked like is I've got at this point 16 years of prevention field experience. And when I started Onward Consulting about 4 years ago, I wanted to make the prevention field a place where professionals can grow, professionals can expand their knowledge, and so that professional development aspect has been really important to me. While at the same time working with communities to address their primary prevention issues that they identify. So I'm still doing a lot of work, strategic planning, working on assessments, grant writing, grant evaluation, but I'm also working on professional development strategies and practices to help build up the field, whether that's mentoring individuals, getting people, certified as prevention specialists, and then giving them that education to help them feel like they know what they're doing in this field. Retention's a big passion area of mine. I want to keep people in the field. We train great people and then they have to leave. And so we're trying to keep more people in it. So the last 4 years has been this really exciting journey of almost like a flower unfolding, as it's blooming, because it just feels like more and more projects and topics have come up that I've realized there's passion about. And this social media is one of them.
And if it were to be a specific flower that is blooming, I have a feeling it would look like the spiff.
And wow. Multicolored, lots of beautiful petals. I think so.
Yes, absolutely. And folks, if you couldn't pick up on it too, Rikki's heart is behind all that she does. She cares about the field and she cares about you. So yeah, shameless plug, go check out her website before you even listen to the remainder of this conversation. Uh, yeah, but so let's segue though. Let's jump into it. I really, the revamp of the Prevention Leaders podcast was really focused on bringing value and knowledge to the field. And so I'd love to kind of tap into some of your knowledge as it relates to social media, because I've tried to keep up online on wink, wink social media because you've been all over the place, coast to coast. And one of the big things you talk about is social media. So can you give us just kind of like the high level? What are some of the things as it relates to social media you do talk about?
Yeah, so you're correct. It is a coast to coast situation where in the last 2 years, this topic specifically has kind of exploded in terms of requests for me to come and train both adult or parents and caregivers and youth themselves. So I've been in rooms full of hundreds of youth at a time talking about this and how to stay safe online. ways to be more aware of the influence that social media is having at them. I was at a local school district recently. All of their 11th and 12th graders went through different, sessions of hearing me talk about this, and we unpacked what that looks like to make choices to advocate for self in this social media space because of some of the research that's coming out that makes that impact on us negative. There's good things, but also there are negative things. And then on the flip side, talking with adults, and that kind of ends up unpacking certainly these pieces of what we know the harm is or the risk is, but also using prevention science like the strategic prevention framework, like the 7 strategies for community change to really influence how we then can implement strategies, activities, incorporate this into some of the work that's already being done in prevention and look at this is reality. Social media is here. It's here to stay. It may morph, it may change. I mean, I was one of the, first OG Facebook members back when it was just for college, students, and you had to have a .edu email to get on Facebook. So I was there in the beginning, and the way that it's morphed over the last 20, 25 years has been fascinating. And then this amazing little device came about where now that computer and that access is right in our hands. And so we're starting to see these impacts. Research is starting to sort of come out about what those impacts are. And so when I share about this, it really starts there. What's the impact? Then what do we do about it?
And I'm glad you're here because I can't pretend to be an expert when it comes to social media. I like to think I know enough to be able to ask good questions, to be determined as we get through this conversation. But I've always been behind the curve in that fun story. I was actually in Iraq without internet when Facebook became a thing. I get back after being gone for a year and a half, and they're like, "Oh, you're on Facebook." Like, what in the world are you even talking about? And I have yet to catch up. So I've been behind since the dawn of social media. Um, and I haven't really jumped in. Like, I'm on all the channels. I engage, but I don't consume a whole lot, and thus I don't stay up with the trends and big next. And so from your more expert perspective, what are some of those impacts besides me just feeling like I'm not a cool dude?
You are cool today. Oh. Well, I could probably categorize a couple. First, just health wise. We were not really designed or built to have a giant bright screen 6 inches away from our face. The strain that it's putting on our eyes in terms of that light and that aggression that happens just within those 6 inches of what we're holding our phone and sort of that light, we're starting to see that the eye is trying to adjust to that. That's a new thing in the last really 15 years. All of mankind up until now did not have that as a problem. This is a new and emerging concept. Mixed with that is certainly also like physical strain to your body, because I don't know anybody that has perfect posture while they're texting and their phone's up here. They're slouched, you're down, your neck's craned, shoulders are down. And that's just creating this really physical response to phones in general and devices in general. When you connect that to the use by youth, we're seeing an increase in obesity, an increase in the risk of type 2 diabetes because of this consumption of gaming and screen time that isn't encouraging physical movement and physical activity. There's a lot to be said about this intersection also with social media and mental health. And I think that most people probably assume that there's a connection, but research is coming out that really actually proves it. So a few things to drop on that note. There's the U.S. Surgeon General actually came out. This was I'm sorry, the previous one during the Biden-Harris administration. Dr. Vivek Murthy, he said there should be warning labels on social media, just like we have warning labels on cigarettes that say, hey, these cause cancer, on alcohol that says, hey, you shouldn't consume this if you're pregnant. His statement in an op-ed piece was essentially, we should have a warning label on social media, because he put together a document, which I'll happily share for the resources so that people can dive into that. He put together some research around social media and the influence it's having on our young people. And they found that when a young person spends more than 3 hours a day on social media, that they are 2 times more likely to experience negative mental health outcomes. So 3 hours, wow, Ricky, that's a long time. But guess what? They're on devices and screens about 9 hours a day. Youth are. And usually social media is about 3.5 hours when you're including, YouTube and TikTok and the various, Snapchat, 3.5 hours each day that they're on socials on average. So that right there, most of our youth then are, more likely to experience mental health outcomes because they've kind of established that 95% of teenagers have some form of a social media account. Uh, Interesting to note, though, about 40% of 8 to 12-year-olds have a social media account. Mind you, it's not technically legal for them to before 13. So we've got almost half of our 8 to 12-year-olds who have a social media account and shouldn't. Um, so there's that. And I want to also say this, and I'd like to just clarify and put adults on blast too, because I think it can be very easy generationally to say things like, I didn't have social media growing up, so I didn't have to deal with all this. And, all kids these days, they just need to get outside and touch grass and climb rocks. And yes, but also this is the reality of today. So again, like I said earlier, how do we intersect here with prevention, understanding that it is the reality? But putting adults on blast, we're on social media on average 2 to 3 hours a day as well. And whatever that means for our work life, it's what it means for our work life. We're checking our phones throughout the
Yeah.
day and all of that. So all of that to say, our time spent online is increasing. Our time spent on social media is increasing, and we're seeing these physical effects, including mental health issues. And I think that that's a major player in some of the negative effects we're starting to see on youth, particularly way more likely to feel lonely, to feel isolated, to feel anxious, to feel depressed. This idea of FOMO and comparison, fear of missing out, we're all susceptible to it because we're human. It's a human problem to see what other people do and say, hey, I want that, or I wish that was me. It's just that now it's in front of us and available on this device 24/7, where I can open my phone and I can see the highlights of your life and think, wow, I really wish that I had that in my life. Or, and it creates this sort of comparison in this culture of, I don't have what I want. And that can create a lot of isolation, a lot of loneliness, a lot of anxiety and depression.
So many different thoughts. First, the young ages, like, oh my gosh,
Right.
wow. I don't know that I want to venture down that because then I'll just go on a soapbox and just ramble and rant and rah. Um, but just the young age, gosh, yeah,
Well, can I
yeah,
ramble and rant for just
yeah, yeah. You're the pro, not me.
one of the other elements that I often talk about when I go to communities and I share either with parents or with youth is this added layer of online exploitation or sextortion, which is so prevalent online, whether it's through gaming or social media apps, where predators are messaging and creating these online relationships with young people, knowing that they're vulnerable. And they seek out vulnerabilities like isolation, loneliness, depression, family issues, and conflict. They're looking for those in the conversation and then look for that exploitation. And the way that that sextortion starts to happen is like they may lead a youth to believe they care about them, they're in a relationship with them, and then exploit, get pictures, get videos. And that just becomes this blackmail type extortion relationship of send me more or else. And youth are dying by suicide because of things like this. And the issues that then transpire. And then you bring in AI and deep fakes and people sharing those online and young students thinking like, I have no hope of getting out of this because people think that was me. The average age of first exposure to pornography is about 8 or 9 years old at this point, and a lot of that has to do with this online exposure where it's so available, and then that creates this spiral into those potentially toxic relationships. So the age thing, man, I could talk about that for a long time too, because it breaks my heart. As you know, youth are the reason why I do what I do. I love youth and young people and empowering them. And so the fact that these people are out there who are willing to destroy lives in that way, their benefit just sends me to a different place.
Yeah. Let me check my heart rate. I feel like my anxiety level is now through the roof as I think about sweet, young, almost 2-year-old baby Eleanor. And yeah, she's always going to be a baby to me. But we're going to talk about some of the positives. But before we do, there's one sort of tidbit, like you were talking about the parenting. And, oh, I didn't have that when I was growing up, which, yeah, that's me. I didn't have social media, didn't get a cell phone until I was 18. Yeah. But I, I feel like prevention has been preparing me for parenthood in that my mindset is that I'm raising Eleanor not to thrive in, you know, a life or a world like it was when I grew up. It's to thrive in the world that we live in now and be prepared to thrive in the future world, which we don't know what it's going to be. So what are those skill sets, those life skills, those mindsets, those habits, those routines, the critical thinking, the self-awareness, all of that. Like that's our job as parents. And we can't just put our head in the sand like, well, they just, like you said, need to get outside and touch grass and they'll be fine. Like we need to build them up and prepare them because we're with the whole like the AI deep fakes, like that is just scary. I need to bleep that out. But it's real and like we need to prepare.
Right.
Prepare them, raise them, and yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
man.
And that's one
Yeah.
of the things that I love talking to adults about, whether it's at state prevention conferences or national conferences or just in a community of people who are like, help, we see this as an issue. It's that we have to accept the reality of today, like you just said. We have to say, okay, this is here to stay. What do we do about it? And you're right that there are positives to social media. We are way more connected as a general world, as a human race, more connected than we've ever been. I usually joke and say, except for back when it was just Adam and Eve, like they were pretty connected, but otherwise, like we're the most connected that we've ever been. That's a good thing because I can be over in Africa on top of Mount Kilimanjaro and I can get connected to my family and let them know that I survived the trip. I made it to the top of the mountain and I'm coming back home. That's an amazing thing that we can do that, have relationships long term and figure out and navigate what that looks like. We can get a lot of information, whether we want it or not. There's a lot of information out there. We're exposed to new ideas, new concepts, new creative methods of communication. All of that is good through social media. But we as adults have to be the adults and step in and use prevention science to figure out how we now navigate this new space and bring you into that conversation. Let's not create solutions for them. Let's create solutions with them.
Say that one more time because that's a highlight reel right there.
Yeah. So we need to bring youth into the solutions, not just bring solutions to them, create solutions with them.
Because prevention is better together. What?
Imagine better together, and especially with youth engagement, because they are in this world. This is their world. They've never known a world without social media or technology. And so how much more, how much better can we get than bringing in the actual experts who are doing it every day?
Right, right. When I just think about some of the positives, the connectedness, the for a prevention coalition or a solopreneur, like we can be our own media company. We have channels and platforms to share the positive messaging, to share and spread the word, to help shift and change the stigma, to increase the help seeking. Like we now have the access. We're not reliant on the local TV news thinking, is that story worthy or not? We have the means to do at least that. And like what I've seen just from me sharing my story, total strangers reach out and share similar stories or ask for advice or connect or ask if I'll be their accountability partners. And there's a lot of good that comes from that, just from having that connectedness too. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, it takes vulnerability. Put yourself out there online and share your story, share your knowledge. But it creates the good in the space. Like, and that's what I talk with youth about a lot is like, how do we now add the good to the space so that it's not all negative and encourage them to think about their content and make sure it's not disparaging to anybody, that it's not going to, bully anybody or put anybody out, but rather we're really able to add the good so that the algorithm that promotes the negative or the violent or the extreme gets kind of put to the side because everybody's sharing this really good information, this really good post.
Yes, yes. And I want to get in. So you talked about just kind of teased a little bit about prevention science. And so, like, how do we approach it by, being innovative, being responsive in a world where we maybe don't have the evidence based social media prevention strategies yet, because it takes a while to get that evidence based, but evidence informed, evidence guided. Like, how do we go about doing that?
Yeah. So I would say in my opinion, in my research, kind of my world of work, the strategic prevention framework doesn't fail us in this either. Like that's still the issue that it's still an issue that can be addressed with strategic prevention framework. You do an assessment. Where are the youth? What are they doing? How long are they online? What are some of the consequences we're seeing from behavior? Those are questions that we ask about alcohol use. Where are they getting it from? How available is it to them? What are their behaviors? What are the consequences? And then start thinking about that capacity, like what exists? What's the resource assessment that says, hey, we've got some resources here, we've got some gaps here. And then that planning piece. And guess what? Risk and protective factors that are evidence based for substance use issues also apply here online. Whether it's an internal kind of individual level risk factor of like rebelliousness or one of kind of like high self esteem that's a protective factor, refusal skills, and sort of that ability to be resilient. Those are there. Family conflict, risk factor drives a student to online, to find friends, to find people, to, all of these pieces, those things we talk about with prevention absolutely relate to the work that we're doing here on social media in terms of intersecting some of these dangerous, places. And connected to that, I would say there's just some really practical strategies that make sense. Have a conversation. Be the trusted adult that that student needs to be able to process what their experience is online. Are they how do they feel after they've been online for 30 minutes? My friend of mine, his child plays one of the online, kind of first person shooter games and had a conversation with her son and just said, hey, I just got to tell you, I don't really like the person that you are when you've been playing that game for 30 minutes and you come off of it to the dinner table. Can we talk about what that looks like for how you disengage? But see, here's the key. And this goes back to the parenting thing you talked about a second ago. We as adults have to teach them how to how to re-regulate, how to sort of reorient themselves back after that exposure online, whether it's a first person shooter game or whether it's I was scrolling TikTok and watching videos and seeing people that I wish I looked like, or the fun that other people were having, or exposure to things online like drinking or using cannabis. We need to give a safe space for them to process what they've seen without consequence, without making those conversations a low drama part of a family conversation so that students feel like they can explore that in the same way that you might ask questions when they come home from a party on a Friday night. Who was there? What'd you see? Was there any drama? Did so-and-so's girlfriend show up? You have these conversations in a way that's not accusatory. It's curiosity so that we're giving youth that space to be able to process what they're experiencing online and therefore figure out for themselves how they want to show up.
Hmm. Reminded me of a video I made talking about, alcohol prevention for, you know, with the audience in mind of parents of high school students. And I talked about having to navigate and try to parent for connectedness more so than short-term obedience. Yes, you need to have that obedience, asterisk disclaimer, but when you have that connectedness, you're able to have those conversations in a safe, non-judgmental, curious way, and you can start setting the foundation for that connectedness when they're young, so young, and it all comes back to being able to have those frequent conversations.
As humans, we are wired for connection. Brene Brown, right? We're wired for this connection, which is why prevention is better together because we're wired that way. We want to be connected. And so what youth are seeking is connection. And they've got a very easy way to do that with a device. But what if we're able to still provide young people, whether in a family setting or a community prevention based setting, access to opportunities to connect. And a good friend of ours over in Long Island, Kim Lowby, she does these teen youth institutes, and they take their phones away for the weekend. And it's not like a take away. I shouldn't have even said it that way. The offer is, please put your phone here because we're going to connect this weekend. And I think that there's just power to that, and parents kind of freak out. How will I know if my kid's alive? Well, we did it. We did successfully do that. When we were growing up in the 90s, our parents didn't know where we were in the neighborhood or if we were at, camp. We didn't know. There's ways to sort of connect still with young people and give them that opportunity. And one of the resources I want to share with you so that you listeners can have access to it, the Biden-Harris administration actually put together a task force on investigating online health and safety for children and youth. And from that, it's a pretty hefty document. And in it, they share some information, some data of what we're seeing online. And then there's this really powerful part where it's kind of a guide for parents and caregivers, as well as guidance and recommendations for the industry. And so for parents, one of the resources that you can find in this is how to develop a family media plan, kind of like a media, yeah, plan is the best way to say that. How to develop a media plan for your family that sort of says, hey, I want to have a conversation about what usage looks like for our family. And again, bringing your kiddos into that conversation to sort of make that a family decision together. And certainly as parents, yeah, you've got kind of the ultimate regulation of that, but giving them voice and kind of tapping into that growing autonomy in that developmental stage where they can say, hey, I think I can take some steps here for myself. And that's really neat. And then the recommendations for the industry are very interesting. And one of them I know is close to your heart and interest is that AI piece. And one of the recommendations is developing ethics around AI, around social media, around what's allowed, what's not allowed, the regulation of privacy for young people in this online space, that maybe there needs to be some sort of report that's offered to parents about what kind of information is kept about their child online, maybe raising that minimum age to like 16 instead of 13 to be on a platform. And of course, that raises a whole bunch of questions. How do you prove that? Are we uploading our IDs into a system to prove that we're a certain age? And do adults? Yeah, there's a whole process and question there, but the recommendations are really interesting. A lot of them have to do with like a national policy level piece, and I think it's an interesting conversation from that national perspective too about how these social media account companies can be held accountable to some of the content that's happening on our platforms.
Day-to-day use. What are some just, your random Wednesday tips for, let's go two-pronged question. First, tips for parents, just, your normal average day. What are some thoughts, things to look for, things to do, and then follow up with for the youth?
Yeah, love those questions. So I would say for parents, thinking about and maybe using the guide that I'll share with you, they've got actual conversation starter prompts for parents to start conversations. So maybe just make it a goal to start that conversation with young people in your life. And, you don't have to be a parent to start those conversations. I'm an aunt to 5 little boys. If you're involved in your community in a place of worship or your neighborhood, you've got relationships with young people. Ask them what's trending. Start a conversation with that. What's trending right now online? What are you seeing? And let that conversation just roll. Ask some probing questions of what do you see the most online? And what are the things that are kind of in your algorithm right now? And do you know that you have power and control over your algorithm? Like you can actually shift what it sends to you and giving youth and young people, especially as a parent, the power to change that algorithm. You can get in there and you can make changes. So the young person, if your child is starting to say, hey, I'm seeing some really violent content or I'm seeing content that I don't really like, let's change that together. Are you open to thinking through how to change that? Because that's the wild thing about these algorithms these days. You might, I know that both of us love fitness and healthy living and healthy eating. We might get on there and like look for some healthy eating plans or influencers who promote that. But what the algorithm might send to us is behaviors that glorify eating disorders or at least, sort of behaviors that indicate that. You and I are educated individuals who probably could spot those things and say, that doesn't align with what I know is science about the human body. But a young person's brain, a child's brain, doesn't necessarily know that. And so again, as a parent, I think that there's that opportunity to listen for things that are shared, like misinformation or, incorrect, and help to navigate that. Prong number two, I think for young people, of course, we're adults, we're starting to help them. And so if that's kind of the answer there, whether you're a parent or just working with adult, that was prong number one. Prong number two is if you're a young person, I think it's about taking control of your online space. And what that looks like for you in terms of do a self scan. And you know what? This is for us adults too. Do a self scan. After you've been on your phone for like 15 minutes, how do you feel? Are my shoulders up and clenched? Am I posture-wise feeling tension in my neck? Are my emotions regulated or am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling depressed? Am I feeling like I saw something I wish I had? Doing that self-scan goes a long way for us to then be able to change our behavior. But unless we're intentional about that, we likely will just stay in this. And that's the other thing that research has shown is not just is it more likely to create negative mental health outcomes being online, the longer we are online, meaning in a single session, the higher the likelihood that we're going to feel those things. So if I pop on real quick, I'm on for 5 minutes, I get back to work. Okay, no problem. But if I'm on it for 30 minutes, for an hour, and how fast does that time go? So again, as a young person, thinking about how much time you're allowing, those videos are meant to actually trick your brain. That's one of the things I talk to youth about when I share with them is I'm like, do you know that they understand how your brain works? They understand human psychology and what hooks you in. And you actually can get addicted. It's a dopamine release. They have developed these apps to feed us dopamine hits over and over and over again. Every 15-second video is designed to create. That's what good content is. It hooks you in right at the beginning. Because how many of us have started a video and you're like, boring, and you move on? It's intended to create a chemical reaction in your brain that keeps you there. In the same way that notifications going off create a dopamine loop. So in the same way you can get addicted to a substance, you can get addicted to that social media because it's creating that dopamine desire. We've probably all been there where you tap your phone because you haven't had a notification in a while and you're like, oh, surely something's come in. That's that dope. Your brain's actually craving dopamine. A wild idea. We could go a long tangent down that about brain science and how that works, but
Right.
yeah.
I read, Dopamine Nation, and that really got me sort of making that connection, and actually, just as I've learned more about my own body's I'm not good at producing dopamine, that's more related to, like, TBI and genetics, but I, like, been learning more about it so I can actually, make more dopamine and feel that joy, but yeah, I'll catch myself like, "Wait, am I do I just need a dopamine hit? Is that why I'm doing this?"
Right.
Um, but to instead of us going down the rabbit hole of brain science, I would encourage both youth and adult listeners to go check out Know Your Neuro, but Dr. Crystal Collier, who's a friend of ours. She's got the brain science broken down and packaged for whatever age range you are in, all related to reducing risky behavior. Great resource. All of it's free on there as well. And you were talking earlier about sort of when it comes to AI and a family sort of code of ethics. She talks about a big protective factor is actually creating a family charter. And these are the things that we Clausens, this is what we believe in and how we show up and live. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
Neat.
just connecting that dot from earlier that I didn't bring up then. Um, so there was that two-prong approach or two-prong question, handled it magnificently. So then that third prong, what are your daily practices when it comes to social media?
It's a great question. And I will tell you this, when I am my healthiest self, I am, shutting down notifications, turning my phone on, focus mode when I'm working or even putting my phone in a different room and really doing focused work because science tells us over and over again, we actually can't multitask the way we think we can. And so that focused work time is key. But as you also know, we're solopreneurs. And so we're out here, we need to promote ourselves. We need to, let people know who we are. So social media is a big component. One of the things I did for myself a couple weeks ago was delete Facebook app off my phone.
Ooh.
Yeah, so now I only ever see it when I'm on my laptop, and even then, it's just if I'm on my, like, personal browser, which I'm often only at my laptop for work, and so I really am not seeing notifications as much anymore there, and I love it. Because anytime now I pop in there, it's like I'm just being, that at everyone that, kinda tagged you, you get tagged in these random posts. I'm just like, "Yeah, see, I don't need that." And what I found with Facebook specifically, Instagram, I'm not experiencing this as much as why I kept that on my phone, but I was experiencing a lot of those negative emotions because of the negative space that was out there. And politically, I've got people who are on both sides of the fence on my feed, but both were being nasty. And I just that was affecting me. And I also just felt like some of the content was creating an emotional response to me that I didn't want in a day. So I really only check Facebook every couple days now, and that's been really good for me. But when I'm not my healthiest self, my phone's with me and I'll probably check it every, 15 or so minutes, or as soon as the text comes in, I feel like I need to respond. And so I think that there's like always a self assessment that can be done to figure out ways to sort of disengage or allow myself to um, put that away for a while. I'm very much an outdoor person. So me being outside, touching grass, like we talked about earlier, not a problem for me. But with that is when I am in my indoor space, making sure that I'm, really intentional, and I've seen some funny memes, sent around, because I think memes are a new sixth love language, the sharing of and reels, but, it said that you used to randomly, you used to watch a movie and then you would check your phone occasionally, and now it's that you're checking your phone and glancing up at your movie occasionally, and I think that there's truth to that. So even with that, like, that kind of challenged me of like, you know what? That's true. When I watch a show or a movie in my house, I'm normally on my phone and will just sort of half listen. So I've been trying to put my phone away even when I'm trying to enjoy other entertainment. And so anyway, long answer to your question, but just trying to be aware of ways that I see it showing up in ways I don't like and trying to eliminate those, ways that I do like and trying to enhance those.
I just want to give you a nice little head nod to when you're at your best and not like wonderful. Like that's what I always try to think too. Like when I'm on my A game versus my B game, um, and not just social media, but phone notifications altogether has been I'm in a transition or a switching things up a little bit. Right now, like I have social media, all the notifications, they don't make a noise, they don't vibrate. So the only time I know I have a social media notification is I unlock my phone screen. And I still have the choice to do I want to go see it or not. Um, then my phone automatically goes into sleep mode and it comes out of sleep mode on a set schedule every day. It goes into relax mode automatically. But what I've been experiencing more recently is a need to feel more connected due to like my parents' family health. And, if my wife and daughter are out and about doing something, like I want to be connected in one capacity. Or if I'm traveling and I don't want to miss the opportunity to video chat with my daughter. And so trying to figure out how can I still be connected but also still very present. And my current experiment is with a smartwatch. Didn't have one. I should say I had a first generation smartwatch. I tend to be an early adopter with tech because I love that kind of stuff. But I got rid of it because I hated the constant vibrating, all of that being just nonstop. But now I've dialed it in where you can really limit the notifications on your smartwatch but still feeling connected for those emergency situations. And so, yeah, like I leave my phone laying around. I am a terrible texter because I'm not attached to my phone anymore. Um, yeah, it's interesting. And I think I share because it's okay to change and shift in different periods of life.
And I feel like there's some momentum around that concept where we've sort of been riding the wave where we're dominated by our phones, our devices, our notifications, and all of that. But I think that there is a movement in the same way that I've seen a movement, especially the younger generation, away from alcoholic drinks and more mocktail. I feel like I've also seen this movement towards people becoming more aware of the power that device has and like you said, intentionally setting that aside, arranging the notifications to come through a certain way. And I'm the same way. I've got a Garmin, but the Garmin, what's nice about my watch is that it doesn't actually, I can't respond on it. Whereas before I had one that I could respond on. And so, I can see it if I need to, but I also cannot. And so all of that to say, like, I think it is about just making intentional choices in your personal life of what works for you. I don't have kiddos, so my emergency needs aren't as the same as yours. But so we're going to have slightly different needs from our devices, but that's okay. And setting a certain person as your emergency contact or they'll always come through regardless, I think is a really healthy thing to do.
Yeah, and L listeners, watchers, it's okay to experiment. Run tests, run trials, and say, "Yeah, for the next 3 weeks, I'm not gonna touch my phone for the first 60 minutes when I wake up. I'm not gonna look at my social media before I even get out of bed." Just run experiments, and like you're saying, just check in with yourself. "How do I feel? How do I feel? What's it like?"
Yeah. And there's just so many things that to be said about that. I mean, put your phone across the room. If it is your alarm clock, put it across the room. You're less likely to scroll if you're having to stand there, whereas you wake up and you just pull it over to you in the bed. But certainly also there's old alarm clocks, like getting those that your device isn't close to you at bedtime. And I've also made the switch personally, just everything in dark mode on my phone and going back to that eye strain I talked about. Like, I now when I look at someone's phone that's not on dark mode, I'm like, "Oh, it's so aggressive for my eyeballs," it just
Mm,
feels so bright, and I think that makes a difference for us too, and of course, the blue light filters and all of that. It just there's ways to be an advocate for yourself in this online
mm.
space, and I think that's the
To get into the science of, like, the blue light, red light, daylight, go check out the Huberman Lab podcast. Huberman is cold. I can't talk. Huberman Lab podcast. I know you are probably already listened to it, but listeners, goes in he makes the science very easily to understand and digestible. Learned a lot that way. Like, I've got a happy light on my desk. It mimics daylight since I'm in a basement, and in the wintertime, especially, the sun's not even up when my workday starts, but I can still get that daylight to work on my circadian rhythm. And yes, and I just want to bring it back to the whole parenting through connectedness and leaving your phone on the counter or in the other room when you're with youth, whether you're a parent, a friend, whatever your connection is. Like Simon Sinek, there's this great video of him talking about it, and he's up on stage with somebody, and the person interviewing him is like, "Hey, can I borrow your phone real quick?" And the guy's like, okay, we're in front of like hundreds of people right now, but sure, here's my phone." And then Simon just holds it and just talks. And he's like, "Now, how do you feel? Do you feel like you're the most important person in my life right now simply because I'm holding the phone or not?" And it's just a powerful video. I'll try to find it and link that in the show notes also. But just holding it, having it there. Like Eleanor's almost 2 and she can tell. And so if you think about the impact, the ripples of connection or not connecting.
yes, right. And we don't necessarily with prevention, I always say this, like, we don't always know that we've prevented something. We don't always know that, we can't always say like, "Oh, this many youth didn't drink because of what we did with this prevention program." We can try to measure it, but ultimately, it's a really hard thing to prove. With prevention of these kind of maybe negative spaces or consequences, like, all that we have really is our bodies as our metric. The body keeps the score, and that idea of, like, knowing what's accumulating in our bodies, what's happening as a result of my space there, and again, going back to what we've already said, it's us as our job as adults to help young people understand that connection simply because we have the knowledge and we can give it to them so that they can make those informed choices. They're totally able to do so. We just have to show them the way.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. We've been chatting for quite a bit. So as we start to bring this plane in for a landing, I know you speak on this topic with the audience in mind of adults, but then also with the audience of youth. Are these like 45-minute conference breakouts, keynotes, full day training workshops, 2.5 day deep dives?
Yeah.
What do you got?
Yeah. So I would say that most common is for me to take about 90 minutes to unpack this. But I love when I have 2 or 2.5, especially with youth, because then we can really get into solutions and ways to figure out for them, for their peers, those solutions and it come from them. So yeah, if I was talking with youth, I would love 2.5 hours. But with adults, we can cover it generally speaking in about 90. But yeah, I love that 2 hour mark because then we can start to say prevention strategy wise, what specifically can be done. So if there's that desire to sort of unpack at a deeper level, that 2.5 hour is perfect for both audience, but certainly could be kind of done in that 90-minute where we're just sort of like, here's the information. Now go find out the rest on your own. But yeah,
What would it look like if you had youth and their parents or caregivers together?
so that would be such a neat idea. It's not happened yet, but what I would love to see is sort of that development of conversation around what is healthy use? How can I, as an adult, make better choices for our home? How can I, as a youth, make better choices for me and contribute to the family in a different way? So I think that would be a really neat conversation.
Yes, and, listeners, if you think you can make it happen, here's your gal to call right here. Oh, that was that was where my head went was I'm picturing a big conference hall, round tables, and they're actually crafting their code, their family code on site. Flip charts, markers, Post-it notes, fidget toys, music.
Conversation just happening. Oh, I see it.
Right?
Caught the vision.
Right? Oh, and of course, social media content being captured at the same time.
Obviously.
Right, right. Oh, awesome. Well, any last bits of wisdom, advice, calls to action, or even simply a story about Oreo?
Oh, well, Oreo is always one to be talked about. That's my beloved rescue dog. What I will share and just sort of put out there is just a visual of those two documents I mentioned, the Biden-Harris administration's task force with the guidance for families and the industry specifically, as well as the U.S. Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy's release back in 2003 of social media and youth mental health. And then the QR code sends you to SAMHSA's document. Well, really, it's a website that has a whole list of different things, including the family media, conversation starters, all sorts of things that sort of unpack what we've talked about today. So that is a resource available to you, and we'll make sure that you can get access to that, of course, in the show notes and everything. But the other thing I would just say is, as we're winding on this conversation, you can probably tell I'm passionate about this. I'm passionate about getting this information into communities. So if there's ever a desire to have me come and get at a greater level and more in depth about this, I'd be happy to have that conversation with you and come to your community and do that.
Awesome. Your website's in the show notes and links to your socials, Instagram, because, as you said, you're never on Facebook. Uh, but this has been a delight. I've learned quite a bit. I've got my core action items that I'm going to take away with me, and I know our audience has their own as well. And so thank you very much for sharing your time and your wisdom with us, and more to come because absolutely better together.
That's right. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you for listening to the Prevention Leaders Podcast with Dave Clausen. Since prevention is better together, make sure you click the subscribe button and share this and other episodes with a friend. If you have a topic idea or guest suggestion, follow us on social media or email us at info@preventionleaders.com.